Today, we are going to talk about energy balancing markets. Sympower is a leading flexibility service provider in Europe. It works with commercial and industrial businesses and energy companies to enable them to participate in energy balancing markets. They do this by temporarily shifting their energy use in response to grid demands. This service, called demand response, helps to stabilize the grid, reduce reliance on fossil fuel plants, and ultimately enables more renewable energy to power the grid. Coming up is Anders Tonhammar Lööf, who is Sympower's Business Development Director in the Nordic region of Europe. Hi, welcome, Anders. Great to have you today.
Thanks.
I'm excited. Now,
Same
you're calling you're calling in from whereabouts are you? Are you in Sweden?
So I'm based in Sweden. I'm based in the southern parts of Stockholm.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Well, brief. I'm always curious about guests who come onto this podcast and on their renewable energy story. What led you to where you are now, and and how did you arrive at Sympower?
So, I did my master's in Uppsala, which is a town like 80 kilometers north of Stockholm. Studied within energy systems engineering. After graduating, I found myself a spot behind two really big screens doing system optimization for a district heating company here in Stockholm. But it was only me and my screens, so no real person-to-person interaction.
Right.
So I moved into a local DSO, so owning the local distribution system here in Stockholm. Worked with project management, actually digging big holes in the streets of Stockholm, making the life of people in Stockholm really difficult by doing a good thing, but no one really understood that. But then I found Sympower. So I was contacted and asked to be the first Swedish employee to start off the branch here in Stockholm, to kickstart our collaboration with the Swedish energy utility Vattenfall. And I took on the challenge. I had a great team in Finland, who were my closest colleagues and mentors, which really helped me to really kick off. And then I really excited and motivated the team at Vattenfall as our closest partner. And that was kind of 5 years ago on the day, actually. So it's, a lot that's happened since.
Wonderful. Well, Sympower, you're with Sympower now. So you're a leader in providing energy flexibility services, to balance the grid, and which is really interesting to me. And we're going to talk about that in a couple of minutes, but you also make renewable energy sources more reliable. So briefly walk us through, how do you guys do this?
So what we do in Sympower is that we offer a solution to companies, and a lot of the companies we work with is big industries, like paper industry, pulp industries, metal, data centers of various sorts, freezing, storages, you name it, property and infrastructure as well. And within those companies, they own a lot of different hardware and machines. Can be pumps, can be grinders, can be pulp mass refiners, more or less anything. All of those machines are built for a purpose, but they also can serve an extra purpose. The inherent flexibility within those machines can be offered to be ramped up or ramped down in order to balance the grid at specific situations when the grid needs it. So we work together with partners or directly, depending on legislation, and then we offer these services to the customers. And then we together in a conglomerate and a portfolio can offer the aggregated services towards the transmission system operators. So they have a need, and we fulfill that need together with partners and customers.
Well, say you probably work with a certain type of clientele. Like, how would you onboard a new client, and what would that client look like typically?
So a typical client can be a sawmill, for instance. So a sawmill is their main process is to create planks mainly, and they get a lot of byproducts. So we often tell them that flexibility is just another byproduct. So they get sawdust and they can make pellets out of that sawdust. The waste can turn into something useful, and flexibility is in the same kind of way for them. So we can tell them that, yes, if you're able to turn off your dryers, for example, for a certain period of time. When we talk about the Swedish markets, we are focused on different kind of products, and 20 minutes is normally duration that we're talking about, like a maximum duration. So if you can turn off your dryers for 20 minutes without harming your end product or your process, then that flexibility that offers can be sold. So you will create an extra revenue stream from an already existing infrastructure. And when we talk to partners about that, we sell it into them in the same kind of way, that they have a large customer portfolio consisting of industries and of property and infrastructure and a lot of different customers. And all of these customers have their own specific inherent flexibility that we can work with. They create an extra revenue stream that can be added to all of their customers, creating a customer stickiness, but also helping the customers to be a participant in the energy transition to be more sustainable.
How can companies participate in demand-side flexibility?
So there are several different ways. So demand-side flexibility can be divided into something that we call local flexibility markets. So let's say that in Stockholm, for example, during extreme cold winter nights, we get those here in Sweden. The power grid is at stress. During that time, the cables feeding into Stockholm might be there might be too high of a demand on them, meaning that we actually can't really put more power into Stockholm. Right. But in order not to, say, shut down the subway or elevators, we can actually control different kind of assets inside Stockholm from industries. But it can also be these more balancing, primary, secondary, and tertiary markets. So that's based on the need from the power grid determined by the transmission system operators. So they create a different market structure we call them market programs, or you can call them products if you like. Frequency containment reserve is one, for example, or frequency restoration reserve. They're all built up in order to supply a certain structural need towards the power grid. Then they package these into different market programs with market regulation and technical requirements. And we then adhere to these and create a software that can control a certain amount of assets to be used in these kind of markets. So for us, it's a portfolio of different markets, but in each market, it's a specific portfolio of assets as well.
When we talked earlier, you talked about hidden flexibility. What is that, and how is it identified? Or just tell me a little bit more about that.
So, I mean, for a normal standard paper mill, for example, what they are focused on is just create paper. That's the thing. They don't really care about their stirrers or their pumps or their pulp mills refiner, as long as they work and they produce the pulp they need, for example. Right. If they're products, exactly, yeah. So what we do together with the experts, so within Sympower we have a big group of technical experts. They are well familiar with paper and pulp and processes and pumps and electrical connections. So they can determine by going to a site visit and looking into the actual process. They can determine what kind of assets that we can control, in what kind of way, for what kind of duration, without actually harming the process. So the paper product owner at the paper mill, for example, might think that if you turn off this pump, you will harm my process, my product will be crappy, for example. But what we can tell him by been doing this for several years now is that we know what kind of processes to turn off and how, and for how long. So we can actually find that little part of hidden flexibility within processes that they didn't know actually was flexible.
That's awesome. Well, how would you work with energy, like with other energy intensive businesses besides sawmills and pulp mills? Some of these aren't normally considered able to participate in the energy transition because they're so energy intensive. So, how do you work with those?
Yeah, I mean, take for example a melting industry, like
Right, like a mine or
metallurgy. Yeah, yeah,
right,
like a mine or uh,
smelter.
smelter, for example. Yeah, smelter is a
Right.
really good example. So
Hmm.
you have those, and it can be seen as like, yeah, okay, if we're going to be flexible with our smelter, you're going to turn it off for several hours, but that's not the case. What we can do is that we can find certain ways of controlling a part of the power consumption.
Hmm.
So we can control a certain amount of steps, for example, or we can control the power output, and by utilizing software and hardware. So instead of offering a full, say, 40 megawatt capacity, we can control, say, 1, 2, or 3 megawatts. So we can divide it into small steps, and then we can utilize that in order to then provide them a new revenue stream.
Sympower, you also talk, we talked earlier about batteries as well in an earlier conversation, and energy storage systems, and they help smooth out, the intermittency of renewable energy sources like solar and wind. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on selling power from batteries back into the grid?
I mean, especially in Sweden, we've seen a big rise of that
Mhm.
in the later years. I think the number of participating batteries in terms of megawatts has increased from like 40, 50 by the beginning of this year to several hundreds. We see there's a big boom coming. I mean, we see it as a good complement. I think we should really look into using the already existing equipment out there, like
Mhm.
coming from industries, but then combining that with the swiftness and the interaction speed from batteries. So I think that both can serve a purpose, and I think there's a really good opportunity to say work with co-location and batteries. So putting up battery parks next to windmills or solar parks in order to at least move the power and the energy over a couple of hours.
Hmm.
Plus, we see that batteries can be extremely finely tuned, so we know that they can react really smooth to frequency disturbances, because that's mainly what we're following. Whilst a big melter, as we talked about earlier, can be quite quick, but not as quick. And I mean, the step we can control a melter in is like, it's huge compared to how small of a deviation you can run with the battery.
Yeah. And
We like combinations.
battery technology is advancing all the time. It's just getting better and stronger and
Yeah.
yeah, lots going on there. What do you hear are the common misconceptions, regarding demand response?
So it's usually, especially like 5 years ago when we started and we went to the first paper mill, they were like, no, we have no flexibility. Nothing is flexible.
Mm,
As long as whatever you turn off, you're going to destroy our process and our product is going to be inferior. That was the main conception, that all we do is to more or less create chaos and havoc on the market
right.
or on the specific process. Uh, to, we've come quite far since like 2019 when we started. So a lot of companies are like seeing the real positive benefit that this can have.
Yeah.
Yes, we might disrupt a specific part of your process for a small and controlled period of time,
Hmm.
but we will not disturb your end product or your main process.
That's
So
important to know for sure.
it's extremely important to know, because
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of it, flexibility is great, but it cannot be used like to harm the main process, the main core of the business.
Hmm.
Because if it is, and if it's used like that, it's not going to be interesting.
Interesting. What's next for Sympower? What do the next 12 months look like for your organization?
In the Nordics, even though we've come a bit further than other countries,
Hmm.
we're still, parts of it is still developing. So there's a lot of new regulation. We're working closer with our NRAs and with our TSOs, both in specific countries, say Sweden, but also in countries that are a bit less advanced in terms of balancing markets, like Norway.
Hmm.
So Norway is blooming now and will be blooming for quite some time ahead. Same as the rest of Europe. We're also working really closely with like the EU Commission in order to make sure that demand response is implemented in a good way, not only in favor for a company like Sympower, but actually in favor for the entire energy system.
Mm-hmm.
We see a lot of expansion in Greece, which is really interesting. So Greece is building, I believe, like 20 plus gigawatts of batteries in the years ahead.
Wow.
That's an interesting change. Same as for like Eastern Europe. Poland has just opened up some markets, same as for Czechia and Hungary. So yeah, I see us expanding into way more countries than we're active in today.
Well, that's great to hear, and it's great to know. I mean, it's always interesting to have what it's like across the pond, you know, in other markets and in other countries, and how we're all reimagining energy in many ways. And thank you, Anders, for joining me today. I really enjoyed talking to you. Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that concludes, you know, today's podcast. It's the 50th episode, Anders. Can you believe it? I know. It's been great.
Anniversary.
So,
Nice.
Yeah, big birthday balloons are going to drop. It's going to be amazing.
Nice.
So thanks again.
You should have told me, I should have worn my
birthday hat or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, have a great rest of your day. And thanks everyone for listening along.
Thank you.